Welcome back to the Halls of History, everyone. I am your host, Scott Hall. Hope you all enjoyed Super Wild Card Weekend. I know I did. Other than the Cowboys and Bucks contest, every game had some close moments. Even the 49ers and Seahawks, up until the Niners opened it up in the second half. Now you can check out my video short for a little history on what Jacksonville did. Trevor Lawrence, as well as on the other side with Asante Samuel Jr. To recap the end of the previous episode, I talked about teams putting up 50 touchdowns in a season and how that has become a very regular thing. 12 teams in 2020, a record 13 in 21, and 8 more this season. And now that we have officially finished the 2022 regular season, 220 times a franchise has scored at least 50 touchdowns in a season all time. Now my question for you, can you name the first franchise to cross the goal line 50 times in a season? The answer? The Chicago Bears in 1941. The Bears played just 11 games that year and scored 57 times. That is just over 5 TDs per game. You put that average into a current 17-game season and you get an astounding 88. The league record is 76 by the Broncos in 2013. But back to the scoring monsters of the Midway. Rookie halfback Hugh Gallarneau, along with second-year halfback and future Pro Football Hall of Famer George McAfee, led the way with 11 touchdowns each. Gallarneau had 8 rushing scores, 2 receiving, and 1 interception return. Remember, players back then were two-way athletes, offense and defense, and of course special teams. McAfee had 5 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving, 1 punt return, 1 kickoff return, and a fumble return for a score. 14 different players scored at least 1 time that season. Future Hall of Fame quarterback Sid Luckman threw 9 touchdowns. The Bears had 8 games scoring over 30 points with a high of 53 and a dominating win over crosstown rivals Chicago Cardinals. The Bears finished the year 10-1, took down the Green Bay Packers 33-14 in the Divisional Playoffs, and then defeated the New York Giants 37-9 in the NFL Championship game. Now, the title game was played 2 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Only 13,341 fans were there to see the game, the smallest crowd to see an NFL title game ever, with clearly, obviously many having their thoughts and actions elsewhere. The game was tied at 9-9 in the third quarter after a Giants field goal from Ward Cuff. The Bears, Norm Stanley, ran for the next 2 touchdowns. McAfee scored in the 4th, and Ken Cavanaugh scored on a 42-yard fumble return for the final score. Now that game, another interesting note, was actually the last time that there was a successful drop kick for 64 years, as Ray Scooter McLean did a drop kick for the final extra point after Cavanaugh's touchdown. Doug Flutie had the next successful attempt on January 1st, 2006 for the New England Patriots. With the United States now going into World War II, many NFL players enlisted in the different branches of the military. 2 players from this championship game were killed in action. Bears back young Bussy, who threw for 5 scores in 1941, was a lieutenant in the Navy and died in the invasion of Lingayen Gulf in the Philippines. Giants end Jack Loomis, a lieutenant in the Marines, was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for valor at the Battle of Iwo Jima. So 1941 was the first time a team reached that magic number of 50 touchdowns in a season. Well, the Bears did it again in 1942, scoring 54. The next team to do it actually came in the All-America Football Conference in 1946, as the Cleveland Browns, in the franchise's first year of existence, scored 55 times on the way to a 12-2 record and won the first of 5 straight championships. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Cleveland Browns won 5 straight titles. 6 players for the Browns scored at least 5 times. It happened quite often in the short 4-year span of the AAFC. The Browns did it 3 times in 4 years. The New York Yankees, yes, heard that correctly, the New York Yankees did it once. The Buffalo Bills, and not the team that is currently playing in the NFL, a completely different franchise, also once. And the San Francisco 49ers did it twice. Yes, those 49ers. They also got their start in the AAFC. In fact, the 49ers scored 69 touchdowns in 1948, finished 12-2, and lost to the Browns in the AAFC Championship. Those Browns were a powerhouse. Quarterback Frankie Albert for the 49ers passed for 29 scores, and Alan Beals was on the receiving end of 14. Future Pro Football Hall of Famer Joe Perry ran for 10 touchdowns, and Frankie Albert also ran for 8. 16 different players scored at least one touchdown that season. Now, the first time an NFL team reached 60 scores in a single year was the Los Angeles Rams in 1950. Tank Younger, the second year back out of Grambling State, scored the 60th touchdown on a 3-yard carry in a 51-14 win over the Packers in the season finale. When you combine the NFL and the AAFC through 1949, teams reached 50 touchdowns 14 times. It only happened 5 times in the 1950s. Now later on, with the addition of the American Football League records with the NFL, it occurred in the decade of the 60s 21 times, 10 from the AFL and 11 for the NFL. The Houston Oilers set the record in the AFL with 66 touchdowns in 1961. Houston had 48 TD passes and scored another 15 on the ground. Future Hall of Famer George Blanda tallied 36 of those touchdown passes, a career high. Not as much scoring happened in the 70s as teams only reached 50 scores 6 times. The 1975 Buffalo Bills had the most in the decade with 57. Now, it really picked up steam in the 1980s as 5 teams scored 50 touchdowns in 1980 alone, and 33 times total in the decade. Washington had 63 touchdowns in 1983 and set a then NFL record with 541 points. However, the next season, 1984, the Miami Dolphins, under the flame-throwing second-year quarterback Dan Marino, became the very first team to score 70 times. That's right, 70 touchdowns. Marino set a record with 48 touchdown passes, and receiver Mark Clayton set a receiving record with 18 scores. In the 1990s, teams tallied 50 TDs 21 times, with 7 coming in the last 2 seasons. It happened 35 times in the 2000s, with the New England Patriots setting a new NFL record with 75 touchdowns in 2007, the same season that Tom Brady threw for 50 scores and Randy Moss caught a record 23. 52 times in the 2010s, teams scored 50. In 2011, the Green Bay Packers became the 3rd team with 70 touchdowns, scoring exactly 70. And then the Kansas City Chiefs scored 71 in 2018. And of course, the 2013 Denver Broncos setting the all-time team record with 76, as Peyton Manning threw for a record 55 touchdowns. Now, does scoring 50 touchdowns in a season guarantee a team a trip to the playoffs? Well, almost. Just over 80% of the time, teams did reach the playoffs if they scored 50 or more. Now, this season, 7 out of the 8 teams made it to the postseason, with the Detroit Lions being the only one not in, but they were very close. The 2 highest scoring teams, the Chiefs and the Eagles, have yet to play in the postseason as they were the number 1 seeds in their respective conferences. Of the other teams that scored 50 touchdowns, the Cowboys, 49ers, Bills, and Bengals are still in. The Vikings got eliminated. 6 of the remaining 8 teams in the playoffs did score 50 or more times this past season. The other 2 teams are the Jaguars with 45 touchdowns and the Giants who scored 40. Now, how about trips to the title game, whether the old NFL championship or, of course, now the Super Bowl? 70 times teams reached the ultimate game if they scored at least 50 touchdowns. The record of those teams in the championships, 35-35. Right down the middle at 500. From 1941, the first year of a team scoring 50 touchdowns, through 1965, the last year before the Super Bowl, teams that crossed the goal line 50 times in either the NFL, AAFC, or AFL won the championship only 13 times. During that span, 33 franchises hit the mark. So only 39% of those squads won a title. The only time it occurred in both leagues was 1948 with the Eagles in the NFL and the Browns in the AAFC, as well as 1962 with the Packers in the NFL and the Texans, later the Chiefs, in the AFL. In the Super Bowl era, a team has put up at least 50 touchdowns 187 times, yet only 47 have played in the big game and 22 have taken home the Lombardi Trophy. 20 of the 56 Super Bowls did not even feature a 50-touchdown franchise. Now, looking through the Super Bowls, the first 3 Super Bowl losers, the Chiefs, Raiders, and the Colts, all finished their respective seasons with 50 or more. The first Super Bowl winner that scored 50 TDs in a season, the Dallas Cowboys in 1971, winners of Super Bowl VI over the Dolphins 24-3. That year, Dallas scored exactly 50, with running back Dwayne Thomas getting the team there scoring the last 4 touchdowns of the season, all in a win over the Cardinals. It took several years for another prolific 50-touchdown offense to hoist the Lombardi again. Jump ahead to Super Bowl XIV, as the Steelers, who scored 52 times, did it in 1979. The first time both teams in the Super Bowl were 50-touchdown scorers? Super Bowl XVIII, after the 1983 season, with the Los Angeles Raiders, who ended up dominating Washington 38-9. Now remember, Washington had scored 63 times that year, set a points record, but they only scored just 1 touchdown in the Super Bowl from John Riggins. Now that we have been seeing more and more teams scoring 50 or more, the last 6 Super Bowl winners all reached that mark in the regular season. In fact, the last time that the Super Bowl did not feature at least one team to score 50 times, Super Bowl 47, with the Ravens and 49ers after the 2012 season. Every big game since then has had at least one team reaching 50. The last 4 Super Bowls had both teams hitting the milestone. And of course, there is a good chance of that happening again this year. But, let's look at this. With one team from each conference remaining, the Jags and the Giants, not scoring 50 times, there is a small chance for this to be maybe the 21st time without one. However, both of those teams are about to play the number 1 seeds this weekend in the divisional round, so we shall see. But hey, anything can happen, especially in the playoffs. Now, you might also be wondering which franchises have reached this scoring milestone the most. Well, of course I looked all that up for you. Here we go. The San Francisco 49ers are at the top of the heap, having done it 18 times. Now, the Indianapolis Colts are second with 17, while the Green Bay Packers, Los Angeles Chargers, and Dallas Cowboys are tied next with 14. There are 4 more franchises that have done it at least 10 times, with the New England Patriots at 12, the Los Angeles Rams and Kansas City Chiefs at 11, and the New Orleans Saints with 10. Following up after that, you have the Cincinnati Bengals are next with 9, then the Chicago Bears, the team that started it all the way back in 1941, they've done it 8 times. The Cardinals, Bills, Browns, Broncos, Vikings, and the Eagles are all tied with 6. The Raiders, Seahawks, Titans, and Commanders are next at 5 times each. The Falcons have done it 4 times, while the Lions, Dolphins, Steelers, and Buccaneers are all tied with 3. The Bucs finally reached that mark in 2019. The Ravens and Panthers, both with relatively short histories, have done it just twice. The Jets, Giants, and Jaguars have done it just once. And for the 2 teams from the Meadowlands, it has been a long time since they got that milestone. The Giants last did it in 1963, when Y.A. Tittle set a then record with 36 touchdown passes. And the Jets, their inaugural season in 1960, with Al Doro throwing for 26 scores and running for another 7. Now, down at the bottom of the list, we find the Houston Texans, which, granted, yes, they have the shortest history of all the teams, but yet they haven't been able to have a season at this point with 50 touchdowns. The closest the franchise that began in 2002 has come is 46 touchdowns in 2009, 2012, and again in 2019. Now, if you are a fan of the show and like the content that I am bringing you with NFL history, don't forget to click subscribe below and the notification button as well. That way you'll know when new shows come up. I will also be periodically jumping in with some video shorts if something significant happens and throw a little history your way. Okay, folks, now that we're coming up on the divisional round of the playoffs, and I have been talking about some pretty prolific offenses, because remember, we still have 6 teams that have scored at least 50 touchdowns this season. And each of the 8 teams have had at least one game this year putting up 38 points. So I'm going to stick with team scoring here. What is the record for the most points scored by one team in the divisional round of the playoffs? Now, of course, a couple of hints. You know I always give you a couple of hints here. Now, it's been a while. It happened over 20 years ago by a team that is pretty low down on that list of seasons with 50 or more touchdowns that I went through just a little bit ago. And this franchise has only ever scored more than 50 points in a game twice, regular and postseason combined. Think you know? Drop your guesses in the comments below, as well as any show suggestions. Also, if you would like to find out more history about players or teams that can get into the end zone quite a bit, be sure to check out one of my other videos that you can see here. Enjoy the divisional round this weekend, and make sure to check out the Halls of History next week. Thanks for watching.